The boy in a wheelchair was enrolled as a joke in the tournament, but he surprised the entire country. Jessica Taylor received the call while folding clothes in the tiny bedroom she shared with her son. The voice on the other end of the line informed her that Ethan, her 10-year-old son, was registered for the state adaptive table tennis tournament happening the following Saturday. She almost dropped the phone. "There must be a mistake," Jessica replied, her voice trembling. "My son has never played table tennis in his life." The woman on the other end insisted the registration was paid for and confirmed. The full name was correct, the date of birth matched, even the ID number. Jessica hung up without understanding anything. Ethan was in the living room doing his homework at the low table she had bought at a thrift store. His wheelchair was leaning against the narrow wall in the hallway. "Son, did you sign up for some tournament?" she asked, trying to stay calm. Ethan looked up from his notebooks. Those brown eyes she knew so well looked confused. "What tournament, Mom?" Jessica explained about the call. She saw the boy's face turn pale. He shook his head, faster and faster. He didn't know anything. He hadn't asked anyone to enroll him. He didn't even know how to play table tennis properly. The first person Jessica thought of was Tyler, the 17-year-old nephew who lived with her sister, Amanda, in the apartment next door. Tyler had a habit of playing mean jokes. The previous month, he had put salt in Ethan's juice during a family lunch. Everyone laughed, except Jessica and Ethan. She knocked on her sister's door that same night. Amanda opened it, her apron stained with tomato sauce. The smell of burnt food came from the apartment. "Is Tyler home?" Jessica asked, straight to the point. "He's in his room. Why?" "I need to talk to him." Amanda called her son. Tyler appeared with headphones around his neck and a bored expression on his face. Jessica told him about the tournament registration. She waited to see some sign of guilt, but Tyler just shrugged. "It wasn't me, Auntie. Why would I do that?" Jessica wanted to believe him, but she knew that tone of voice well. It was the same one he used when he lied about doing his homework or about taking money from his mother's wallet. Amanda immediately defended her son. "My Tyler wouldn't be capable of such cruelty." Jessica returned home with a heavy heart. Ethan was still awake, looking out the window at the city lights. He had that habit when he was worried. Jessica sat beside him and ran her hand through the boy's brown hair. "We'll find out who did this," she promised, "and we'll cancel the registration tomorrow." But the next morning, when Jessica called the tournament number, she found out the registration couldn't be cancelled. The deadline had passed, and the money was already committed to the event's organization. It was $200 that someone had paid, $200 that took Jessica a whole week to save up, working as a cleaner in 3 different houses. "You can simply not show up," the organizer suggested with a tired voice. Jessica thanked her and hung up. She looked at Ethan, who was pretending to be focused on the drawing he was making. She knew her son was listening to everything. The boy had a way of seeming distracted when he was in fact paying attention to every word. "Mom," Ethan said quietly, "maybe I should go." "What?" "To the tournament. Maybe I should go." Jessica sat down heavily in the chair next to him. Ethan kept drawing, but she noticed his hand was trembling slightly. "Son, you don't have to prove anything to anyone." "It's not that," he replied, still not looking at her. "It's just, if someone paid $200 to humiliate me, maybe I should show up." Just to see the look on their face, Jessica didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Her son, only 10 years old, had already learned to face the world's cruelties with his head held high. She remembered when the accident happened 3 years ago. Ethan had just turned 7 when the school bus lost its brakes on the downhill slope. 4 children were injured. Ethan was the most serious. The doctors said he would never walk again. In the first few months, the boy cried every night. Jessica slept on the floor next to his bed, holding his hand until sleep came. Amanda helped as best she could, bringing food and taking care of Ethan when Jessica needed to work. Their mother, Grandma Margaret, came from the countryside every month to spend a few days with her grandson. It was Grandma Margaret who helped Ethan accept the wheelchair. She was 68 years old and had a wisdom that came from decades of dealing with loss. She had raised 5 children alone after her husband abandoned them. She taught Ethan that life always exacts a price, but we choose how to pay it. Jessica decided she would take Ethan to the tournament, not to compete, but to find out who had done that. Perhaps the person would show up to see the result of the cruel joke. Perhaps there would be some clue at the location. On Saturday morning, she dressed Ethan in the black shirt he liked. It was simple, without designs or logos, but the boy said he felt handsome in it. Jessica carefully tied his sneakers, those sneakers that never touched the ground when he was in the chair. The gym was on the other side of the city. Jessica had calculated the bus route the night before. 3 different buses. Ethan would need the folding chair, the lightest one, to make stairs and turnstiles easier. Grandma Margaret showed up at their door at 7 in the morning. "I thought you could use some company," she said, with that smile that always calmed Jessica. The trip was long. Ethan was quiet most of the time, watching the landscape through the window. Jessica noticed he was pressing his fingers against his own leg, a sign of nervousness she knew well. Grandma Margaret told stories from the countryside, trying to distract her grandson, but he only nodded politely. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now continuing. When they arrived at the gym, Jessica felt her stomach churn. The place was huge, much bigger than she had imagined. There were banners hanging announcing the tournament, people walking around with organization badges, food stalls on the sides. It was a serious professional event. At the reception, a woman with graying hair checked Ethan's name on a list. She looked from the paper to the boy, then back to the paper. Her lips tightened into a thin line. "Ethan Taylor," she confirmed. "Yes," Jessica answered. The woman hesitated. Jessica saw her exchange a look with another organizer, a younger one standing nearby. There was something in that look. Pity? Embarrassment? "Adapted children's category," the woman said, handing a badge to Ethan. "Table 4. The gentleman. I mean, the competitor must report in 15 minutes. Ethan took the badge with both hands. Jessica saw he was trembling. Grandma Margaret put her hand on her grandson's shoulder. "Let's see where that table is," she suggested firmly. They followed the signs to the competition area. The gym was divided into sectors. There were table tennis tables for different categories. Ethan looked at everything with wide eyes. Jessica realized her son had never been in a place like that. Their life was small: apartment, school, hospital for physical therapy. There was no space or money for events like this. When they arrived at table 4, there was a group of people around it. A boy of about 12 was warming up with a professional racket. He had fast and precise movements. Next to him, a man in a suit was talking with other adults. Jessica heard fragments of the conversation. "My son is a 2-time regional champion," the man said with evident pride. "We're aiming for the national competition next year." Another voice joined the conversation. Jessica turned and felt her blood run cold. It was Tyler. Her nephew was there in the gym with his phone in his hand. He was discreetly filming the group around the table. When he saw Jessica, his face turned white. "Auntie, I can explain." Jessica crossed the space between them in 3 large steps. Grandma Margaret held Ethan by his wheelchair, preventing him from getting closer. "It was you," Jessica said, her voice low but filled with anger. "You signed Ethan up." Tyler quickly put his phone away. The people around them began to pay attention to the scene. "Auntie, listen. It wasn't exactly like that." "What do you mean, not exactly like that? Where did you get $200 to pay for this registration?" Tyler looked around, clearly embarrassed by the attention they were attracting. He pulled Jessica by the arm, trying to move her a bit away from the group. She pulled away forcefully. "Talk," Jessica demanded. "Now." "It was a bet," Tyler began, his voice barely a whisper. "Some guys from school said I didn't have the guts to sign Ethan up for a tournament like this. That I just joked around but never actually did anything, So you humiliated your cousin because of a bet," Jessica finished, feeling tears burning her eyes. "It wasn't to humiliate him." Tyler defended himself, his voice rising. "It was just a joke. I was going to cancel before the day, but then I forgot and—" "You forgot," Jessica repeated, incredulous. You forgot you were using my son as a joke." Grandma Margaret approached with Ethan. Her expression was stern, her lips pressed tightly together. Jessica knew that expression. It was the same one her mother had when she was deeply disappointed. "Tyler," Grandma Margaret said, and the name sounded like a sentence. "Leave. Now." "Grandma, I didn't mean to." "Now," she repeated, with a firmness that brooked no argument. Tyler looked from his grandmother to Jessica, then to Ethan. The boy had his head down, his fingers gripping the badge he had received. Tyler opened his mouth as if to say something, but then turned and hurried out of the gym. Jessica felt her legs go weak. She held onto Ethan's wheelchair to keep from falling. The anger gave way to a deep sadness. Her own nephew, her sister's son. The family that was supposed to protect Ethan had become a source of pain. "Mom," Ethan called, his voice so soft she could barely hear it. "Can we go?" Jessica looked at her son. She saw tears in the corners of his eyes. Ethan didn't cry easily. In the 3 years since the accident, she had seen him cry only a few times. But there in that huge gym, surrounded by people who probably saw his presence as a joke, the boy was on the verge of tears. She was going to say yes, that they would take the 3 buses back home and forget all about this. But then a voice interrupted. "Excuse the intrusion," an elderly woman approached. She had completely white hair pulled back into a bun and carried a folder under her arm. "I couldn't help but overhear the conversation. I'm Barbara Wilson. I used to be a coach here at the club." Jessica quickly wiped her eyes, trying to regain her composure. "Sorry for the scene," she murmured. "Don't apologize," Barbara replied, looking directly at Ethan. "Young man, did you come to compete or not?" Ethan looked up, surprised. Jessica started to explain that they were just leaving, but Barbara raised her hand, asking for silence. "Let the boy answer." Ethan looked from the woman to his mother, then to his grandmother. Grandma Margaret had an unreadable expression. The boy took a deep breath. I don't even know how to play properly," he admitted. "That's not what I asked," Barbara said, kindly but firmly. "I asked if you came to compete." There was a long silence. Jessica felt that moment was crucial, although she didn't know exactly why. Ethan squeezed the name tag even tighter between his fingers. "I want to try," he said finally. "Ethan, no," Jessica began, but Grandma Margaret touched her arm. "Let the boy decide," the grandmother said quietly. Barbara smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. "Then let's go. Do you have a racket?" Ethan shook his head. Barbara opened the bag she was carrying and took out a racket from inside. It wasn't brand new. It had signs of use, but it was well cared for. "This was my grandson's," she explained, handing the racket to Ethan. "He stopped playing a few years ago. I think it will serve you well." Ethan held the racket carefully, as if it was something precious. Jessica saw the boy run his fingers over the rubber surface, feeling the texture. "But I don't know how to play," Ethan repeated, his voice full of uncertainty. "Then you'll learn now," Barbara replied. "Come on. We have 15 minutes before your match. I can show you the basics." Jessica wanted to protest. This was madness. Ethan wasn't in any condition to compete. He would be humiliated in front of all those people. But when she looked at her son, she saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't confidence, but maybe it was courage, or stubbornness, or both. Barbara led Ethan to an empty table in the corner of the gym. Grandma Margaret and Jessica followed behind. The elderly lady explained the correct way to hold the racket, how to use the wrist, where to aim. Ethan absorbed every word, focused. "In your situation, you have an advantage," Barbara said. "The chair gives you stability. You don't need to worry about leg movement. You can focus everything on your upper body." Ethan practiced some movements in the air. The racket was light, lighter than he expected. Barbara took a little ball and started tossing it gently to him. The boy missed the first few attempts, but on the 5th try, he managed to return the ball with an awkward motion. "That's it," Barbara encouraged. "Now again." Jessica watched with a tight heart. Part of her wanted to snatch her son away from there, protect him from what was coming. But another part, smaller and quieter, wondered if maybe Ethan needed this, needed to try, even knowing he might fail. The gym's loudspeaker announced the start of the competitions. Ethan had to go to table 4. Barbara put the ball away and looked into the boy's eyes. Remember, concentration and a firm wrist. And the result doesn't matter. The important thing is that you are here. Ethan nodded. Jessica saw that his hands were trembling when he grabbed the wheels of the chair to move. She wanted to say something, anything to remove that expression of fear from her son's face. But the words wouldn't come. Grandma Margaret bent down beside Ethan's chair. She held her grandson's face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "You are stronger than you think, my boy," she said. "You always have been." They approached table 4. Ethan's opponent was already in position. It was the boy Jessica had seen earlier, the 2-time regional champion. He looked at Ethan with a mixture of confusion and disdain. His father, the man in the suit, was beside him with an irritated expression. "Is this a joke?" the man asked, looking at the referee. "You put my son to play against this." Jessica felt the anger rise again, but Barbara was faster. "Against a properly registered competitor," she replied, her voice firm. "Or do you have a problem with the tournament rules?" The man recognized her. His expression changed immediately. "Mrs. Barbara, I didn't know you were here." "Now you know," she cut him off. "And I suggest you keep your comments to yourself, otherwise I'll have to report it to the organizers." The referee, a young man in a striped t-shirt, seemed uncomfortable with the situation. He looked at the regulations, then at Ethan, then back at the regulations. "The registration is valid," he confirmed, although his voice sounded hesitant. "We can begin." Ethan positioned himself on one side of the table. The wheelchair was the right height for him to reach the table comfortably. Jessica noticed that this was probably intentional. The adapted tables were different. The boy held the paddle with both hands, just as Barbara had taught him. Ethan's opponent, who was named Brandon, according to the sign on the table, served the first ball. It was a strong, direct serve. Ethan barely saw the little ball go by. It bounced on his side of the table and went out before he could react. 1-0, the referee announced. There were muffled laughs from the small audience that had formed around them. Jessica saw that some people were filming with their cell phones. Her heart ached. Tyler had probably planned exactly that, to film Ethan being humiliated and spread it on social media. The second serve was equally fast. Ethan tried to return it, but his paddle found only air. More laughter. The boy looked at his mother, and Jessica saw the shame written on his face. She took a step forward, ready to put an end to it, but Grandma Margaret held her arm. "Wait," the grandmother whispered. On the third serve, Ethan managed to get his paddle on the ball. It went back to the other side of the table, but at a strange angle that sent it out. Brandon didn't even have to move. 3-0. "This is a waste of time," Brandon's father complained. "Father, my son has serious competitions today." Barbara turned to him with an icy expression. "Then I suggest he takes all his opponents seriously, including this one." The game continued. Ethan lost point after point. But Jessica noticed something. With each ball, the boy took a little less time to react. The paddle started to find the little ball more often, even if the returns were weak or wrong. 6-0. 7-0. The laughter from the audience subsided, replaced by whispers. Some people were starting to look uncomfortable. 8-0. 9-0. On the 10th point, something different happened. Brandon served with the same force as before, but Ethan was waiting. The boy hit the ball back and it landed on his opponent's side of the table. Brandon, who had started to relax, almost didn't reach it. He returned it hastily, and the ball hit the net. "Point for Ethan Taylor," the referee announced, surprised. 9-1. It was just 1 point, but it meant something. Jessica saw Ethan's posture change. He straightened his back in the chair. The paddle was firmer in his hand. Brandon served again, this time with less force. Perhaps he was trying to end the game quickly. Ethan returned it, and a rally began. 3, 4, 5 hits. The little ball went back and forth across the table. On the 6th hit, Ethan made a mistake and the ball went out. 10-1. Brandon had won the first set. But something had changed. The people around them weren't laughing anymore. They watched in silence. During the 1-minute break between sets, Barbara approached Ethan. "Are you seeing his pattern?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "He always serves to the same spot." "Exactly. Use that." Jessica felt a wave of emotion. Her son was learning. There, in the middle of that absurd, humiliating situation, Ethan was learning how to play. She looked at Barbara and saw the woman smiling slightly. The second set began. Brandon served to his usual spot, but Ethan was waiting. He returned it with more force than before, and the ball sped past his opponent. Brandon managed to return it, but he was surprised. The rally continued. Ethan lost the first point of the second set, but won the second. 1-1, the audience grew. People from other tables came to see what was happening. The boy in the wheelchair who was actually competing. Jessica saw when Ethan's father pulled his son by the arm during a break. "Finish this quickly," he hissed. "You're making a fool of yourself." But Ethan didn't seem so confident anymore. Brandon had discovered something. Every time Brandon tried a strong serve, he telegraphed the movement beforehand. A slight shoulder movement, a change in his foot position. And Ethan was reading these signals. 3-3, 4-4. Table 4 had become the center of attention in the gym. Even competitors from other categories stopped to watch. Jessica heard the comments around her. "That boy has natural talent. Look at his concentration. How did he learn so fast?" Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 5-5, 6-6. Brandon's face was red. He looked at his father, at the coach, searching for guidance, but they seemed as lost as he was. How was a boy who didn't even know how to play an hour ago tying with a 2-time regional champion? The truth was simple. Ethan had something Brandon never needed to develop. Determination born from desperation. Every point he won was proof that he wasn't a joke, that he deserved to be there. 7-6 for Ethan, the first time he was in the lead. The audience erupted in murmurs. Jessica felt tears streaming down her face. Grandma Margaret held her hand so tightly it hurt. Brandon called a timeout. The referee granted it. The boy went to his father, who was speaking quickly into his ear. Jessica saw when Brandon shook his head, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. When he returned to the table, he seemed different, more serious, more focused. The game resumed. Brandon had changed his tactic. Instead of strong serves, he began to vary them. Short serves, long serves, with spin. Ethan struggled to adapt. 7-7, 8-7 for Brandon. Barbara approached again. She technically couldn't give instructions during the game, but the referee turned a blind eye. "Don't try to guess," she said to Ethan. "Just react." 8-8, 9-8 for Ethan, 9-9. The tension was palpable. The next point would decide the second set. If Ethan won, they would be tied in sets. 1-1. Brandon served. It was a perfect serve with spin that caught Ethan by surprise. The boy returned it, but the ball was too high. Brandon prepared an attack, a smash that would certainly end the point. But then he hesitated. For a fraction of a second he hesitated, and in that fraction of a second the ball dropped lower than he expected. The smash hit the edge of the table and went out sideways. 10-9, Ethan Taylor wins the second set, the referee announced. The gym exploded in applause. Not everyone was clapping, some still seemed shocked, but many recognized the feat. Jessica could no longer hold back her tears. Ethan had tied the game, 1-1 in sets. During the break between the second and third set, Jessica saw movement at the gym entrance. Amanda had arrived. Her sister looked around, clearly searching for someone. When her eyes met Jessica's, she crossed the gym almost at a run. "Jessica, I just found out what Tyler did." Amanda gasped, the words tumbling out. "I swear I didn't know. When he got home just now and told me, I couldn't believe it." "We'll talk later," Jessica replied dryly. She had no time or energy to deal with her sister at that moment. "But I need you to know that I never—" "Amanda," Grandma Margaret interrupted. "Not now." Jessica's sister seemed to shrink. She looked at Ethan, who was drinking water and listening to Barbara's instructions. The boy saw his aunt and quickly looked away. The third and decisive set began. The atmosphere had changed completely. It was no longer a boy being humiliated. It was a real competition. Ethan served first. It was a simple serve, no frills, but firm. Brandon returned it without difficulty. The point continued. 10 touches, 15, 20. The little ball crossed the table at an ever-increasing speed. Ethan moved his chair skillfully, adjusting his position for each return. On the 23rd touch, Brandon attempted a cross-court attack. Ethan couldn't reach it. 1-0 for Brandon. But the boy's face no longer showed superiority. It showed respect, and perhaps a little fear. The points went back and forth. 1-1, 2-1 for Ethan, 2-2, 3-2 for Brandon, 4-3 for Ethan. It was impossible to predict who would win. Jessica noticed that more people kept arriving. The news had spread through the gym. The boy in the wheelchair who was giving the two-time champion a hard time. Some were even filming, but now it wasn't to make fun of him. It was filming out of admiration. 5-4 for Brandon, 5-5, 6-5 for Ethan. With every point, the gym reacted. Applause, cheers of encouragement. Most of it was for Ethan, Jessica realized. The crowd had chosen its favorite. 6-6, 7-6 for Brandon, 7-7. Sweat was pouring down both boys' faces. Ethan's right arm was red from the effort. Brandon was panting between points. 8-7 for Ethan, 9-7, match point. If Ethan won the next point, he would win the game. He would defeat the regional two-time champion. He would prove he wasn't a joke. Brandon served. It was the most careful serve he had made the entire game. The ball crossed the table slowly with a lot of spin. Ethan returned it, but the ball came back weak. Brandon attacked. Ethan defended. Brandon attacked again, harder. Ethan defended again, but barely managed to return it. The ball was high, slow. It was the perfect chance for Brandon. He jumped, preparing for the definitive smash. The racket came down with force. The little ball flew towards Ethan's table. It seemed impossible to defend. But Ethan threw himself to the side in his chair. His racket stretched to the limit, and somehow, miraculously, he touched the ball. It came back spinning, skimming the net, and landed on Brandon's table. The boy tried to reach it, took 2 desperate steps, but the ball had already bounced twice. 10-7, Ethan Taylor wins the match, the referee announced. The gym exploded. People were jumping, shouting, giving a standing ovation. Jessica didn't know when she had started sobbing, but now she was crying openly. Grandma Margaret hugged her, also with tears in her eyes. Even Amanda was crying, standing a little apart, with her hand over her mouth. Ethan seemed to be in shock. He looked at the racket in his hand, as if he didn't understand what had happened. Barbara approached and put her hand on the boy's shoulder. "You were incredible," she said simply. Brandon was still standing on the other side of the table. His face was red, but not just from the effort. He was crying. His father quickly approached, ready to console his son. But Brandon ignored him. Instead, he walked around the table. Jessica grew tense. What was he going to do? Humiliate Ethan in some way? Demand a rematch? But Brandon simply extended his hand. "You play really well," he said, his voice choked. "I've never faced an opponent like you." Ethan shook his hand, still seeming not to believe it. The people around them applauded even louder. Jessica saw Brandon's father step back, his expression closed off. But the boy didn't care. He stood there talking to Ethan about some of the plays from the match. Barbara approached Jessica and Grandma Margaret. "Your son has a natural talent," she said. "In all my years as a coach, I've rarely seen anyone learn so fast." "He had never played before today," Jessica replied, still fighting back tears. "I know. That's how I recognize the talent." Barbara paused, choosing her words. "I would like to train Ethan, at no cost." Consider an investment in a young athlete's future. Jessica looked at the woman, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You would train my son?" "If he wants to, yes, and if you allow it, of course." They looked at Ethan. The boy was beaming, talking animatedly with Brandon. It was the first time in a long time that Jessica had seen him so happy. She thought about everything they had been through, the accident, the recovery, the pitying looks, the cruel jokes, and now finally a moment of pure joy. "I'll ask him," Jessica said. But before she could call Ethan, the loudspeaker announced something that made the entire gym fall silent. "Attention, competitors and audience. Unfortunately, due to technical problems with the broadcast, the tournament will be delayed by 2 hours. We ask for everyone's understanding." People began to disperse, complaining. Jessica saw this as an opportunity to take Ethan home, to let him rest after the emotional intensity of that morning. But then a staff member approached them. "Sorry to bother you," she said, addressing Ethan, "but the tournament director would like to speak with you. It will only take a few minutes." Ethan looked at his mother, uncertain. Jessica nodded. They followed the staff member to a room at the back of the gym. It was a simple office with a desk, a few chairs, and posters of past competitions on the walls. A man of about 50 stood up when they entered. He had graying hair and a gentle expression. "Ethan Taylor?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Parker, the director of this tournament and the club." Ethan shook his hand timidly. Richard pointed to the chairs, and everyone sat down. Jessica was holding Grandma Margaret's hand, not knowing what to expect. "First, congratulations on the win," Richard began. "It was one of the most impressive games I've seen in years at this tournament." "Thank you," Ethan murmured. "But that's not the only reason I asked you to come here." Richard paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I received a complaint a few days ago. Someone registered you for this tournament through an online system, using a fake email. The person paid the fee, but clearly the intention wasn't noble." Jessica felt her stomach tighten. Tyler. That wretched boy had left traces. "I know who it was," Jessica said, her voice trembling with contained anger. "It was my nephew, and he will pay for this." "Actually," Richard continued, looking directly at her, "the complaint wasn't about the false registration. It was about the email used." "What do you mean?" Richard turned the computer screen toward them. There was the email used to register Ethan, wheelchairjokeemail.com. Jessica felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Grandma Margaret turned pale. Even Barbara, who had entered the room with them, seemed shocked. "This is—" Jessica couldn't finish the sentence. "Disrespectful, cruel, and possibly falling under discrimination legislation," Richard completed. "The person who filed the complaint attached screenshots of social media conversations where there was apparently a bet about how long Ethan would last before giving up. The quicker he gave up, the bigger the prize." Jessica's blood boiled. She thought she knew Tyler, that she knew what the boy was capable of. But this crossed every line. "I want the names of everyone involved," she demanded. "I'm going to the police station today." "Jessica," Grandma Margaret began, but her daughter interrupted her. "No, Mom, not this time. They made a mockery of my son. They placed a bet using his condition. That's a crime." Richard raised his hands in a calming gesture. "I understand your anger, and it is more than justified. But before you make any decision, I'd like you to know something. The person who filed the complaint doesn't want their name revealed. They said they participated in the bet, but regretted it when they saw the registration had actually been confirmed. That was the person who tried to warn you, but couldn't get through." Jessica blinked, confused. "Warn?" "Yes. She called the number registered with the entry form several times, but no one answered. The number was for a public phone near the school her nephew attends. So that was why the registration had been confirmed without them knowing beforehand. Tyler had used a public phone to register, probably to avoid leaving any traces that could lead back to him." "And this person who reported it?" Grandma Margaret asked, her voice careful. "Did she say why she changed her mind?" Richard nodded. "She said she has a younger brother with a disability. When she realized the joke had gone too far, she tried to undo it, but she couldn't cancel the registration by herself." Jessica sank into her chair. The anger was still there, hot and pulsing, but now mixed with something more complex. Someone from the group that had made the bet had tried to set things right. "What happens now?" she asked. "Legally, I can forward this report to the authorities," Richard explained. "But I would like your permission first. After all, it was your son who was the target of the situation." Jessica looked at Ethan. The boy was quiet. absorbing everything he heard. She remembered the joy on his face minutes earlier, the genuine happiness after the victory, and she wondered if dragging this into the legal sphere would turn that good memory into something more painful. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. There's no rush." Richard stood up, indicating the conversation was over. "But one last thing. The tournament rules allow us to invite exceptional competitors to train at our club. Ethan qualifies if he's interested." Ethan looked up, surprised. "Train here?" "Yes. We have programs for developing athletes. Qualified coaches, proper equipment, all paid for by the club." Richard smiled. "You have a lot of potential, young man. It would be a shame not to nurture it." Jessica didn't know what to say. Everything was happening too fast. A few hours ago they had arrived thinking it would just be a humiliation to overcome. And now there were training offers, talks about athletic potential, reports of discrimination. They left the room stunned. Barbara was waiting for them outside. "So?" she asked. "He was invited to train at the club," Jessica replied, still processing it. "Excellent. Then I can work with him officially." Barbara smiled. "I'll create a specific program, tailored to his needs." Ethan finally spoke, his voice small. "Mom, can I accept?" Jessica looked at her son. She saw hope, anxiety, fear, and excitement all mixed on his face. How could she deny him that? "Let's talk about it at home," she said softly. "About all of it." They left the gym amidst the crowd dispersing because of the tournament's delay. Amanda was waiting for them at the exit. She stood up as soon as she saw them, her expression anxious. "Jessica, can we talk, please?" "I have nothing to say to you right now," Jessica replied, walking straight past her. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But Tyler, he's not doing well. Since he came home, he's locked himself in his room. He won't eat. He won't talk." Jessica stopped. She turned to her sister. "And I should care?" "He's just a boy, Jessica. A stupid boy who did a horrible thing, but still a boy." "Ethan is a child too," Jessica replied, her voice low and dangerous. "A child who had to endure being entered into a tournament as a joke, who had his condition used as the subject of a bet, who could have been humiliated in front of hundreds of people." "I know, and he will pay for it. I guarantee it." Amanda wiped her tears. "But please don't involve the police. He's 17. A criminal record now could destroy his future." Grandma Margaret approached. "Amanda, you're asking for compassion for your son. The same compassion he didn't have for his cousin." "I know, Mom. I know." Amanda sobbed. "But he's my son. I need to try to protect him, even knowing he's wrong." Jessica looked at Grandma Margaret, then at Ethan. The boy was watching his aunt with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Ethan," Jessica called, "what do you think?" Everyone turned to the boy, surprised by the question. Ethan was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm. "I won the game," he said, simply. "Tyler wanted me to be embarrassed, to be a joke, but I won." "Isn't that punishment enough for him?" Jessica felt her chest tighten. Her 10-year-old son had a maturity that put many adults to shame. "Are you sure?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "But he has to apologize. For real, not just because Aunt Amanda made him." Amanda practically threw herself to hug her nephew. "Thank you, Ethan. Thank you so much. I promise he will apologize, and it will be sincere." They parted ways there. Amanda went back to the apartment to deal with Tyler. Jessica, Grandma Margaret, and Ethan took the 3 buses back home. During the trip, Ethan stared out the window, lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" Jessica asked. "About everything that happened today," he answered. "It was very strange, Mom. This morning I was ashamed to be there, and in the end people were cheering for me. You showed them you were capable, that you deserved to be there. But I barely knew how to play. How did I win?" Grandma Margaret chimed in. "Sometimes, my grandson, we discover what we're capable of when we're pushed into difficult situations. You had a choice. You could give up or try. You chose to try. And if I had lost? What if I had been horrible? Then you would have lost, Jessica said. But you would have lost trying, and that would have been a victory in itself. Ethan thought about that. Jessica could see the gears turning in her son's head. Mom, I want to train at the club. I want to play for real. Even after everything that happened today. Because of everything that happened today, Ethan corrected. I liked playing. I liked feeling like I was good at something. Jessica hugged her son. At that moment, on that crowded bus going home, she felt that something had fundamentally changed. Ethan had discovered something beyond an ability for table tennis. He had discovered confidence. When they got home, it was already late afternoon. Jessica prepared a quick snack while Ethan took a shower. Grandma Margaret stayed in the living room, thoughtful. Are you going to let him train? Her mother asked when Jessica brought her coffee. I think so. You saw how excited he was. I did, but I'm also worried. Grandma Margaret took a sip of coffee. This club, the coaches, it all seems good. But what if it's too much for him? What if the pressure is too great? Jessica had thought about that too. Ethan was only 10 years old. He had just discovered a new passion. Would it be fair to put him in a competitive environment so early? I'll talk to Barbara, Jessica decided. I'll make it clear that Ethan is a child, that he needs to have fun above all else. And what about Tyler? Jessica sighed. I don't know, Mum. Part of me still wants to see him pay for what he did. But Ethan is right. He lost. He saw the cousin he wanted to humiliate win. Maybe that's punishment enough. Children do foolish things, Grandma Margaret pondered. Horrible, foolish things sometimes, but they also learn, if we let them. There was a knock at the door. Jessica went to answer it, expecting to find a neighbor, but it was Tyler. The boy's eyes were red and swollen. He had clearly been crying for hours. Can I talk to Ethan? He asked, his voice hoarse. Jessica wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to scream, curse, make him feel a fraction of the pain he had caused. But she took a deep breath. Wait here. She went back inside and called Ethan. The boy came to the door, his hair still wet from his bath. When he saw Tyler, his expression closed off. Hi, Tyler said awkwardly. Hi, Ethan replied coldly. I came to apologize. For real, Tyler wiped his nose with the back of his hand. What I did was horrible. There's no excuse. I'm an idiot. Ethan said nothing. He just looked at his cousin, waiting. I didn't think you would actually go, Tyler continued. I thought Aunt Jessica would find out first and cancel everything. It wasn't supposed to get to this point. But it did, Ethan said simply. I know. And I ruined everything. Aunt Jessica hates me now. My mom hates me. Everybody hates me. I don't hate you, Ethan said, and Jessica saw the surprise on Tyler's face. I'm angry, really angry. But I don't hate you. Tyler started to cry again. How can you not hate me after what I did? Ethan thought for a moment. Because hate is too much work, and I'd rather spend my energy playing table tennis. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. Tyler let out something between a laugh and a sob. You're a much better person than I am, cuz. I know, Ethan replied, and there was the ghost of a smile on his lips. Tyler stood there for a few more minutes, awkward, not knowing what to do. Finally, he turned to leave. But before he did, he looked back. Ethan, you played really well today. For real. Thank you, Ethan said. Tyler left. Jessica closed the door and looked at her son. The boy went back to the living room as if nothing had happened, picked up the remote and turned on the television. Are you okay? Jessica asked. I am, Ethan replied. Tired, but okay. Jessica sat next to him on the sofa. Grandma Margaret joined them. They stayed like that, the three of them, watching some program on TV. It was a simple, ordinary moment, but Jessica felt a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The weekend passed quickly. Monday morning, Jessica called the club. She spoke with Richard and with Barbara. She scheduled a meeting to discuss the details of Ethan's training. It was clear the boy would train twice a week, outside of school hours. Barbara would be the main coach, with support from other professionals at the club. "And what about the cost?" Jessica asked, knowing it was beyond her means. "As I said before, the club covers everything for developing athletes," Richard answered. "Equipment, training, even physical therapy if needed. We consider it an investment." Jessica knew she should feel relieved, but a part of her worried. She didn't like owing favors. She didn't like depending on the generosity of others. But she looked at Ethan, who was beside her, listening to everything with shining eyes, and she swallowed her pride. "Then we accept." The first training session would be on Wednesday. Jessica rearranged her work schedule so she could take and pick up her son. On Tuesday night, Ethan was so anxious he could barely sleep. On Wednesday morning, he woke up before the alarm. The club during the week was different, emptier, quieter. Barbara was waiting for them at the entrance with a warm smile. "Ready to work?" she asked Ethan. The boy nodded, excited. Barbara took him to a smaller room with just 2 table tennis tables. There was another child there, a girl about 8 years old, who also used a wheelchair. "Ethan, this is Emma. She's been training here for 6 months. Emma waved timidly. Ethan waved back. Jessica noticed her son seemed more relaxed, knowing he wasn't alone in that situation. The training began with basic exercises. Barbara corrected his posture, his grip on the racket, the movement of his wrist. It was technical, repetitive work, but Ethan absorbed every instruction with total attention. Jessica watched from a side bleacher. After an hour, Barbara took a break. "Do you mind if I work with Emma for a little while now?" she asked Ethan. "You can practice alone against the wall." Ethan agreed. He picked up a ball and began to practice against the wall, just as Barbara had taught him. Jessica saw that her son was repeating the movements the coach had just corrected, completely focused. Emma approached Barbara and they began working on some more advanced techniques. The girl was good, Jessica realized, better than Ethan was at that moment. But there was something in her son's dedication that suggested he would reach that level soon. After the training, on the way back home, Ethan wouldn't stop talking. "Did you see how Emma does that topspin shot? It's incredible. Barbara said she'll teach it to me in a few weeks, and she said there's a regional tournament in 2 months, and that maybe I can participate if I train well. Not to compete seriously, just for the experience. Do you think I'll be ready, Mom?" Jessica smiled. "I think you can do anything you set your mind to, son," and she truly believed that. She had seen the proof the previous Saturday. The boy who barely knew how to hold a racket had defeated a 2-time champion. If that wasn't proof of determination and talent, she didn't know what was. The following days established a new routine. Ethan went to school in the morning, Jessica worked, and 3 times a week they went to the club for training. On weekends, Ethan practiced at home against the wall, using an improvised table that Jessica had bought second-hand. A month after the tournament, Tyler showed up at their door again. This time he seemed different, more composed, more mature. "Can I talk to you, Aunt?" he asked. Jessica let him in. They sat in the small living room. Tyler fidgeted with his hands, nervous. "I wanted you to know that I'm going to therapy," he began. "My mum thought it would be good, to work on my impulsiveness and lack of empathy." "That's good," Jessica said, guarded. "And I wanted to know, how is Ethan? Is he still mad at me?" Jessica sighed. "Ethan is fine. Better than fine, actually. He's training, making progress. As for being mad, you'd have to ask him." "Would he talk to me?" "I don't know. Do you want to try?" Tyler nodded. Jessica called Ethan, who was in his room doing homework. The boy came out and was surprised to see his cousin. "Hi," Tyler said. "Hi," Ethan replied, cautious. I just wanted to see how you are." "I'm fine. Training a lot." "I heard you're doing great at the club." Ethan shrugged, modest, but Jessica saw the small smile on his lips. "I'm trying." There was an uncomfortable silence. Tyler cleared his throat. "Look, I know I already apologized, but I wanted you to know that I'm really trying to be a better person. And if you ever want to give me another chance to be real cousins, I'd like that." Ethan looked at his cousin for a long moment. "Are you really going to therapy, or are you just saying that?" Tyler blinked, surprised by the direct question. "I'm really going. Twice a week. And is it working?" "I think so. At least I'm starting to understand why I did those things and how to stop doing them." Ethan thought about it. "Okay, we can try again. But if you do something like that again—" "I won't," Tyler interrupted quickly. "I promise." "Don't promise," Ethan said, with a wisdom beyond his years. "Promises are easy to make and hard to keep. Just try to be a better person. That's all I ask." Tyler nodded, moved. He said goodbye shortly after. When he left, Jessica hugged her son. "Are you sure you want to give him another chance?" "Nobody's perfect, Mom." "You always say that. So I have to at least let him try, right?" Jessica kissed the top of her son's head. Sometimes she forgot how special he was, not because of his talent in table tennis, but because of the size of his heart. 2 weeks later, the day of the regional tournament Barbara had mentioned arrived. Ethan was nervous. Unlike the first tournament, this time he knew what to expect. He knew the size of the pressure, the intensity of the competition. "What if I lose in the very first game?" he asked on the way. "Then you lose," Jessica answered, "and you learn from it." The tournament was smaller than the state one. Fewer people, less structure, but to Ethan it seemed just as important. Barbara was there, as was Emma and other students from the club. Ethan's first opponent was a boy from Denver with more experience. The game was difficult. Ethan lost the first set but won the second. In the third, decisive set, he used everything he had learned in the last month. He won 11-9. The second match was easier. Ethan was more comfortable, more confident. He won in 2 straight sets. The third match, for the semifinals, was against a boy 2 years older. It was a long, tiring game. Ethan lost. Jessica expected him to be devastated, but Ethan just shook his opponent's hand and came back to where she was. "It's okay, Mom, he was better, but I learned a lot playing against him." "Are you proud of yourself?" Ethan thought about the question. "I am. I didn't win the tournament, but I played well. Better than last time." Barbara approached. "You've improved so much, Ethan. In just 1 month, your technique has gotten absurdly better." "Thank you for training me," Ethan said sincerely. "My pleasure," Barbara smiled, "and I'm already excited to see where you'll be in 6 months, a year." Jessica was also excited. Watching Ethan progress, overcome challenges, was one of the greatest joys of her life. She thought about everything that had happened since that fateful phone call a month and a half ago. The initial anger, the planned humiliation, and how everything had turned into something positive. In the following months, Ethan kept training. He participated in more tournaments, won some, lost others, but he always learned, always improved. Tyler visited occasionally, and slowly the cousins rebuilt a relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Amanda and Jessica also fixed things between them. It was difficult, it took time, but they were sisters, and families, however imperfect, find ways to heal. A year after the first tournament, Ethan was invited to join the state-adapted table tennis team. It was a huge honor. He would have to train more, travel for competitions, dedicate more time to the sport. "What about school?" Jessica worried. "I'll manage," Ethan assured her. "I've handled things so far, haven't I?" And he was right. Ethan's grades remained good. He had learned to manage his time, to balance sports and studies. Jessica sometimes marveled at her son's discipline. Joining the state team brought new challenges. The training was more intense, the opponents stronger. Ethan had to deal with more painful defeats, harder-won victories. But he also made friends, met people from different places, and expanded his world. At one of the state tournaments, Jessica saw Brandon, the first opponent Ethan had ever faced. The boy was competing in another category. When he saw Ethan, he approached. "Hey, Ethan, long time." Ethan smiled. "Brandon, how are you?" "Good. I heard you made the state team. Congratulations." "Thanks. And you, still playing?" "Always." Brandon paused. You know, that game against you. It was one of the most important ones of my life. Really. Really. It made me realize I was taking everything too seriously, you know. Forgetting to have fun. You played with so much joy that day. It reminded me why I started playing in the first place. Ethan was speechless. He had never thought that day would have meant something to Brandon, too. I'm happy to hear that, he said finally. They talked a little more, then said goodbye with promises to meet at future tournaments. Jessica saw the interaction and felt her heart warm. That first tournament, which started as a cruelty, had ended up touching more lives than she had imagined. 2 years after that first day in the gym, Ethan was competing at a national level. He was 12 years old and was already considered a promise in American adapted table tennis. Barbara was still his coach, but now there was a whole support team. Physical therapists, fitness trainers, sports psychologists. Jessica sometimes felt lost amidst all that. She was just a cleaner. She didn't understand high-performance sports, competitive strategies, training periodization. But Ethan always brought her back. "Mum, I just need you to be you," he said. "You don't need to understand table tennis, you just need to be here." And she was. At every important training session, at every competition, even when it meant missing a day of work, even when exhaustion consumed her. Grandma Margaret was also always present when she could, coming from the countryside to cheer for her grandson. It was at a national tournament that something significant happened. Ethan was in the quarter-finals, playing against the current champion of the category. It was a difficult game. The opponent was very good. Ethan lost the first set easily. In the second, he fought, but lost again. Jessica saw the frustration on her son's face. Ethan asked for a timeout and came to where she was. "I'm not going to make it," he said, his voice broken. "He's too good." "Maybe he is," Jessica replied. "Or maybe you're not playing your best game yet." "What do you mean?" "You're worried about the score, about winning or losing. Remember the first game, you didn't even know how to play properly, but you were so focused on each point that you ended up winning." Ethan thought about that. "Are you saying I should forget the score? I'm saying you should play, that's all. Each point is unique. It doesn't matter what happened before or what will happen after." Ethan returned to the table with a different expression. The third set began, and Jessica saw the change. Ethan was no longer tense. He played with fluidity, with naturalness. He won the third set 11-6. The fourth set was even better. Ethan seemed to be in total control, reading every move of his opponent. He won 11-4, 2 sets to 2. Everything would be decided in the fifth and final set. The tension was palpable. The gym, which previously had few people paying attention to that table, was now packed around them. Everyone wanted to see the outcome. The points alternated, 1 for Ethan, 1 for his opponent, 2-2, 3-3, 4-4. Each point was a battle, 5-5, 6-6, 7-7. The opponent won 2 points in a row, 9-7, match point for him. If Ethan lost one more point, he was eliminated. Jessica held Grandma Margaret's hand, both barely able to breathe. Ethan served. It was a perfect serve with spin that took the opponent by surprise. 9-8. He served again. Another point. 9-9. The crowd roared. The opponent served nervously. Ethan returned it firmly. The rally continued. 10 touches, 15, 20. Neither wanted to give in. On the 23rd touch, the opponent tried an attack. Ethan defended and counterattacked. The ball skimmed past the opponent's table. 10-9 for Ethan. Now it was match point for him. If he won the next point, he would win the game and go to the semi-final. Ethan took a deep breath. He served. His opponent returned it well. Ethan attacked. His opponent defended. Ethan attacked again, harder. His opponent managed to return it, but the ball came back weak. This was the chance. Ethan positioned himself, preparing for the decisive smash. The racket came down with force and precision. The ball flew, touched his opponent's table, and went out the side before he could react. Point. Game to Ethan Taylor. The gymnasium erupted. Ethan raised his arms incredulous. He had beaten the champion of the category. Jessica and Grandma Margaret hugged each other, crying with joy. Barbara ran to congratulate her student. Ethan had been eliminated in the semi-finals, but it didn't matter. He had proven something that day, proven to himself and to others that there were no limits to what he could achieve. In the following months, Ethan continued to surprise everyone. He won his first national tournament in the category. Then he won another. People started talking about him as a possible candidate for future Paralympics. Jessica sometimes couldn't believe it. The son that Tyler had signed up as a joke for a tournament was now a rising star in American sports. Life had a strange way of turning around. Tyler, who was now 19, was in college studying psychology. He said he wanted to help young people with behavioral problems, perhaps prevent them from making the mistakes he had made. His relationship with Ethan had improved a great deal. They weren't just cousins now. They were friends. During a visit, Tyler brought something for Ethan. "I have something for you," he said, handing over an envelope. Ethan opened it. Inside were photos from the first tournament. Ethan playing, the look of concentration on his face, the audience watching open-mouthed. "Where did you get these?" Ethan asked. I took some pictures that day," Tyler admitted, embarrassed. "Before I got kicked out, I was originally going to use them to laugh at you, but I kept them all these years. I thought maybe you'd like to have them." Ethan looked at the photos. He saw himself on that day that changed everything, the boy who barely knew how to play, but who had enough courage to try. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I'll treasure them." 3 years after the first tournament, Ethan was 13 and competing at an international level. He traveled to Canada, Australia, New Zealand. He met players from all over the world, absorbed different techniques, and matured as an athlete. Jessica still worked as a cleaner, but the club had started paying a small stipend for outstanding athletes. It wasn't much, but it helped. She could work less and spend more time with her son. Grandma Margaret moved from the countryside to be near them. She said she wanted to follow her grandson's journey more closely. Amanda and she had completely repaired their relationship, and now Amanda helped by looking after Ethan when Jessica needed to work. It was during a South American tournament that something important happened. Ethan was in the finals against a Canadian player 2 years older, already part of his country's Paralympic team. It was an extremely difficult match. Ethan lost the first 2 sets. It was 0-2. To win, he would have to win 3 sets in a row. It seemed impossible. During the break, Barbara approached him. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. He's very strong." "He is. But so are you." Barbara paused. "Remember your first match, against Brandon?" "I remember." "What did you feel in that moment?" Ethan thought about it. "Fear. But also freedom. I had nothing to lose, so I just played. And now, what do you have to lose?" Ethan looked at his coach. He understood what she was saying. He was playing with a fear of losing instead of playing to win. He was trapped by expectations and pressure. "Nothing," he replied. "I have nothing to lose." The third set began with a different Ethan. He played with the same freedom as on that very first day. And it worked. He won the third set 11-7. The fourth set was even better. Ethan was on fire. Every move was perfect. He won 11-5, 2 sets to 2. The fifth set was evenly matched. Both players were at the limit of their abilities. The score rose together, 5-5, 6-6, 7-7, 8-8, 9-9, 10-10. Advantage Ethan, 10-11. If he won the next point, he would be the Pan-American champion. His opponent served. Ethan returned it. The rally continued. Every previous point seemed like child's play compared to the intensity of that rally. 20 touches, 30, 40. Neither gave in. And then it happened. The Canadian tried a very risky attack. The ball touched the net, lost speed, and fell on Ethan's side. It seemed impossible to reach. But Ethan dove for it, his chair tilting dangerously. His racket stretched to the limit, and he touched the ball. By a miracle, by pure determination, he touched it. The little ball came back spinning, landed on the opponent's table, and went off the side before the Canadian could react. Point! Ethan Taylor is the Pan-American champion. The Canadian gymnasium erupted. Half the crowd was rooting against Ethan, but even they recognized the magnitude of that last point. Jessica and Grandma Margaret hugged each other in the stands, crying non-stop. Ethan looked at the racket in his hand, still processing what had happened. Barbara ran to hug him. Other American athletes present joined the celebration. The Canadian who had lost approached. He was crying, but extended his hand. "That was the best game of my life," he said in Spanish, which Ethan now understood reasonably well. "Thank you." Ethan shook his hand, emotional. He knew exactly how the Canadian felt. He had been on the other side, had lost important games before, but there was beauty even in defeat when you gave your best. The Pan American victory opened doors. Ethan was invited to train with the United States Paralympic team. There was talk of scholarships, sponsorships. The future seemed bright. But Jessica worried. Ethan was still a child. He was only 13. All that pressure, that expectation could be too much. One night she talked to her son about it. "Are you happy?" she asked directly. Ethan thought before answering. "Most of the time, yes. Sometimes it's tiring. Sometimes I just want to be a normal kid." "You can be. You can stop all of this if you want." "I know, Mom, but I don't want to stop. It's just, sometimes I wish it were simpler, you know?" Jessica understood. She also missed the simpler days. But she also knew she couldn't protect her son from everything. He had chosen that path, and all she could do was support him. The years passed. Ethan grew, not just in height, but in maturity. By 15, he was one of the best adapted table tennis players in the United States. By 17, he was ranked among the best in the world in his category. Tyler finished college and started working with at-risk youth. He sometimes brought some of those young people to watch Ethan's games, saying they needed examples of overcoming adversity. Amanda had gone back to school, taking a technical course in nursing. She said she wanted to help people, and that she had learned from past mistakes the importance of having empathy. Grandma Margaret, at 77 years old, remained Ethan's biggest fan. She went to all the important games, always with a word of wisdom when her grandson needed it. It was at a pre-Paralympic tournament that something unexpected happened. Ethan was warming up when he saw a familiar face in the audience. It was Brandon. He had stopped competing a few years ago, but apparently still followed the sport. During a break, Brandon approached. "Ethan, long time no see, man." They hugged. It had been years since they'd seen each other. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked. "I came to see you play, and also—" Brandon hesitated. "I wanted to tell you something I've never told you." "What? That game, our first game, you saved my life." Ethan blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I was under absurd pressure from my father. I had to win always, be the best always. I was starting to hate table tennis, and then you showed up, and you reminded me that sports are supposed to be fun. After that game, I talked to my father. I set boundaries. I managed to start playing again for love, not out of obligation." Ethan didn't know what to say. He had never thought that day had meant so much to Brandon. "I'm happy to know I helped in some way," he said finally. "You helped more than you can imagine." Brandon smiled. "And now look at you, about to go to the Paralympics. I'm so proud, man." They talked a little more, remembering that first day, laughing about the memories. It was strange to think how it all had started. A cruel joke that turned into something beautiful. The pre-Paralympic tournament was a success for Ethan. He won his category, securing a spot for the Paralympics. The dream was becoming reality. But before the Paralympics, there was something Ethan wanted to do. He organized an event at the club where it all began. An amateur-adapted table tennis tournament, open to anyone with a disability who wanted to try. Barbara thought the idea was wonderful and helped organize it. Jessica and Grandma Margaret worked hard to make it all happen. Amanda and Tyler also helped, setting up food stalls, decorating the gym. On the day of the event, dozens of children and young people with different types of disabilities showed up. Some had never held a paddle before, others had been playing for years, but they were all there for the same reason, because Ethan had proven it was possible. Ethan spent the whole day teaching, encouraging, playing with each participant. Jessica watched him with tears in her eyes. Her son, who had been entered into a tournament as a joke, was now inspiring other people to try. At the end of the day, there was a small ceremony. Richard, the club director, gave a speech. 5 years ago, a boy came into this gym not knowing how to play table tennis. He had been entered into a tournament as a cruel joke. But that boy showed all of us the meaning of determination, of overcoming, of courage. And today, that same boy teaches us the greatest lesson of all, that we must always give back, always help others find their way. Everyone applauded. Ethan turned red with embarrassment, but also with pride. He had come a long way from that scared 10-year-old boy. Barbara approached the microphone. I've trained many athletes in my life. Some went to the Paralympics, some won medals. But Ethan is special, not just for his talent, but for his character. He never forgot where he came from. He never let success go to his head. And that is more important than any medal. Jessica was called to speak. She went up on the small stage with her legs trembling. I don't speak well, she began nervously, but I want to thank everyone who helped my son get here. Barbara, who saw potential where others saw a joke. Richard and the club, who opened doors. My mother, who always believed. And most of all, Ethan, for never giving up, for always believing in himself. When she came down from the stage, Ethan hugged her tightly. Thank you, Mom, for everything. You don't need to thank me, son. You did it all yourself. I didn't. I never did anything alone. And it was true. Ethan's success was also the success of everyone who believed in him. Of Jessica, who worked double to give her son opportunities. Of Grandma Margaret, who taught wisdom when it was needed. Of Barbara, who saw potential where others did not. Even Tyler, who with his terrible mistake ended up putting Ethan on a path that changed his life. The Paralympics arrived. Ethan was as nervous as he had ever been. It was the biggest stage, the greatest pressure. But when he entered the Paralympic gym, when he saw the flags, heard the anthems, felt the energy, something changed. He remembered that very first day, the packed gym, the laughter, the fear. And he remembered the decision he made, to try, to not let the cruelty of others define who he was. The first game of the Paralympics was tough. Ethan was nervous, making more mistakes than he should. He lost the first set. But then he took a deep breath, remembered the words of his mother, of Barbara, of his grandmother, and he played the way he knew how to play. He won the next 3 sets. He won the match. And as the tournament progressed, Ethan grew more comfortable. Quarterfinals, semifinals, final. In the final, he faced an experienced Canadian, a gold medalist from the previous games. It was frightening, but Ethan was no longer afraid. He had confidence, experience, determination. The match was epic. 5 sets of pure emotion. On the last point of the final set, Ethan served with trembling hands. The Canadian returned it hard. Ethan defended. Attack, defense, attack, defense. And then, the perfect opening. Ethan attacked with everything he had. The ball flew, touched the opponent's table and went out the side. Point, match, gold medal. Ethan raised his arms, tears streaming freely. In the audience, Jessica and Grandma Margaret cried, holding each other. Barbara screamed with joy. Amanda and Tyler jumped up and down. Brandon, who was there watching, applauded on his feet. On the podium, when they placed the gold medal around his neck, Ethan looked out at the audience. He saw his family, his friends, the people who believed in him. And he thought about how it all began. A cruel joke, a fraudulent registration, a boy who was afraid but brave enough to try. And now he was there, Paralympic champion, not in spite of the wheelchair, but as he was, complete, capable, victorious. After the Paralympics, Ethan's life changed even more. Sponsorships, interviews, recognition. But he remained humble. He continued training at the same club, with the same Barbara. He continued living with his mother in the same small apartment, even though he could afford something bigger. Why change what works, Miss, he would say. 1 year after the Paralympics, Ethan was 18. He had finished high school and now faced decisions about the future. Keep focusing on sports, go to college, do both. It was Grandma Margaret who helped clarify things. My grandson, you have a gift, a rare talent. But even rarer is what you do with that talent. You inspire people, you give hope. That is more valuable than any medal. Ethan thought a lot about that, and he made a decision. He would keep competing, yes, but he would also start working with young people with disabilities, helping them find their paths in sports. He set up a project at the club. First Steps was the name he chose. The idea was to give children with disabilities the opportunity to try different sports, to discover their talents. Jessica helped with the organization. Tyler, now a psychologist, offered emotional support to the participants. Amanda, a nurse, took care of the health aspects. Barbara trained those interested in table tennis. Brandon showed up whenever he could, helping as a volunteer. The project grew quickly. In 6 months, more than 50 children were participating. In a year, there were 200. Stories of overcoming began to emerge. Children who thought they couldn't do anything discovered they could do a lot. One of these children was a 9-year-old boy named Noah. He had cerebral palsy and came from a very poor family. His mother worked like Jessica doing cleaning jobs. Noah was shy, withdrawn, thought he would never be good at anything. Ethan saw something in the boy, a spark, the same one Barbara had seen in him years before. He started working with Noah personally, teaching him table tennis, giving him confidence. 6 months later, Noah won his first amateur tournament. His mother cried so much that Jessica had to comfort her. She knew exactly how that woman felt. It was the same emotion she had felt when Ethan won his first game. One night, years after it all began, Jessica and Ethan were talking on the small apartment balcony. Grandma Margaret had passed away the previous year peacefully, saying she was proud of everything she had lived to see. "You don't regret anything, do you, Mom?" Ethan asked. Jessica thought about it. "I regret a lot of things. Not being able to give you more comfort when you were little. Not having prevented the accident of—" "The accident wasn't your fault," Ethan interrupted. "And as for comfort, you gave me what was important. Love, support, presence. Still, sometimes I think about how things could have been different. Different how? If the accident hadn't happened, if Tyler hadn't signed you up for that tournament, if—" "Mom," Ethan interrupted her again, "if everything had been different, I wouldn't be who I am, and I like who I am." Jessica looked at her son. He was right. All the difficulties, all the pain, had shaped the amazing man he had become. "You're right," she admitted. "Sometimes the hard path is the one that leads us where we need to be." They stayed silent for a moment, looking at the city lights. It was the same view Ethan used to look at as a child when he was worried, but now there was no worry, just peace. "You know what's funny?" Ethan said. "Tyler did me a huge favor with that joke." "How so?" "If he hadn't signed me up, I would never have discovered table tennis. I would never have found my path. I would never have helped so many kids. So in a strange way, I thank him." Jessica smiled. "You're a much better person than I am, son. I learned from you." Years later, Ethan was 25. He had competed in 2 more Paralympics, winning more medals. But what made him most proud was the First Steps project, which now operated in 10 American cities, helping thousands of children. Tyler was married and had a son. He worked as a psychologist and volunteered at Ethan's project. The guilt for what he had done years ago never completely left him, but he had found redemption by helping others. Amanda was head nurse at a public hospital. She also volunteered when she could, using her experience to ensure the children in the project received proper care. Jessica had retired from cleaning jobs. She now worked full-time for the project, handling the administrative side. It was work that fulfilled her much more. Barbara had retired from her role as head coach, but remained involved as a consultant. She was 82 years old and said that Ethan's project was her greatest legacy. Brandon had become a doctor. He worked in sports rehabilitation and often referred patients to the project. His friendship with Ethan had remained strong over the years. At a project event, Ethan was invited to give a speech. He went up on stage, looked at the audience full of children with disabilities and their families, and began, "When I was 10 years old, someone signed me up for a table tennis tournament as a joke. The person wanted to humiliate me, wanted to prove that I was incapable, and at that moment I almost believed it. I almost let someone's cruelty define who I was." He paused, letting the words sink in. But then I made a choice. I chose to try. I chose not to let others decide what I was capable of, and that choice changed my life. Ethan looked specifically at the children. You will all face people who don't believe in you. People who will laugh, doubt, and put obstacles in your way. But those people's opinions don't matter. What matters is what you believe about yourselves. He saw tears in many eyes. He saw hope being born. I won't lie and say it's easy. It's not. There will be days you'll want to give up. There will be moments that seem impossible. But I'm here to tell you it's worth it. Every effort, every attempt, every small victory is worth it. Ethan finished his speech and stepped down from the stage to enthusiastic applause. Children approached, wanting autographs, photos, advice. He gave attention to each one, knowing how much it meant. At the end of the event, Tyler approached him. "Cousin, can I talk to you for a minute?" They stepped away from the group a little. "I know I've apologized 1,000 times," Tyler began, "but I need you to know something. That day, that terrible joke I made, I carry it with me every day. Not in a way that paralyzes me, but in a way that reminds me to be better." "Tyler, no, let me finish." Tyler cleared his throat. "You turned the worst thing I ever did into something beautiful. You took my cruelty and created something that helps thousands of people. That's amazing. And I want you to know I'm grateful. Grateful that you forgave me, that you gave me another chance, that you showed me people can change." Ethan hugged his cousin. "We all deserve second chances," he said. "You made the most of yours." That night, Ethan went home and found a surprise. Jessica had invited everyone for dinner. Tyler and his family, Amanda, Barbara, Brandon, even Emma, the girl who trained with Ethan years ago and was now a professional athlete too. They ate, laughed, and shared stories. It was a strange family, united not by blood but by shared experiences, by pains overcome together, by victories celebrated side by side. At the end of the evening, Jessica asked for everyone's attention. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, raising her glass, "to the winding paths that lead us to the right places, to the difficulties that make us strong, and most of all to the love that sustains us through everything." Everyone raised their glasses. Ethan looked around the table and felt a deep gratitude. Everything he had achieved, was because these people had been by his side. Years passed. Ethan continued competing at a high level, but his main focus was the project. He traveled across the United States, opening new centers, training new instructors, inspiring new children. In every city there was always a child who reminded him of himself, scared, insecure, thinking they weren't capable. And to each of these children, Ethan told his story. The story of the boy who was signed up for a tournament as a joke, but who chose to turn that cruelty into fuel. When Ethan turned 30, the First Steps project was in 50 cities and had helped over 10,000 children. Some became professional athletes. Others simply discovered confidence and joy in sports. They all carried a little of the lesson Ethan had learned, that physical limitations do not define human potential. Jessica, now 60 years old, looked at everything with immense pride. She thought of that day, almost 20 years ago, when she received the call about her son's registration. She thought about how close she had come to stopping Ethan from going, and she was thankful she had let him make his own choice. At a project anniversary event, a journalist asked Ethan, "If you could go back in time, would you change anything?" Ethan thought for a long moment. "No," he finally answered. "Every difficulty, every pain, every challenge brought me here. Change anything, and I might not be in this place, doing this work, helping these people. So no, I wouldn't change a thing." "Not even the joke? Not even the cruel way you were signed up for that first tournament?" Ethan smiled. "Especially not that, because it was that joke that gave me purpose. It was that cruelty that taught me compassion. That moment of humiliation was what prepared me for all the victories that came after." The journalist was impressed. "That's a remarkable perspective." "It's the only perspective that makes sense," Ethan replied. "We can choose to be defined by the bad things that happen to us, or we can choose to use those things to make us stronger. I chose the second option." End of story. And you? What did you think of this story of overcoming adversity? Leave your opinion in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Do you think Ethan made the right choice by forgiving Tyler? We would love to read your point of view. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories.